The idea that she was still available at number 10 made the people in the Fever front office, I mean, we know who that is. It's Amber Cox. It's Steph.
That's not the response of a composed basketball analyst. That's real disbelief. A gasp. Sitting alone watching the draft, and the Indiana Fever just made a selection so puzzling that it sparked an audible reaction. So, what exactly did the Fever do at number 10 that was so shocking? They picked Reaction Johnson, a 5 feet 9 inches playmaker out of South Carolina, their third point guard on a roster that badly needed size.
In college, the year was 2023. It was the women's NCAA tournament, and Iowa was facing off against South Carolina. And Reaction Johnson, wide open at the three-point line, gets waved off by Caitlin Clark. Reaction Johnson really took that to heart. She even talked about it recently.
It would probably be Caitlin Clark.
And look at how far Caitlin Clark is playing off of Reaction Johnson. Caitlin Clark, left side. She doesn't even look at her. Waves her hand as if to say, I don't care about you. I'm not defending you.
That's one reason I hate the internet now. Because of that situation, like I got bashed, I got bullied. I want to.
There it is, the instant that defined their college rivalry. March 2023 NCAA tournament, Iowa versus South Carolina. Clark is completely unimpressed with Reaction Johnson's shooting ability that she literally waves her off from 15 feet away, doesn't even act like she'll defend her, gestures to her teammates, I'm not concerned about this player. That moment went viral. Reaction Johnson spoke about being harassed online because of it, choosing to withdraw and focus on herself. She used it as fuel, returned for a 5th season, improved her three-point shot. But here's what makes the Fever's choice so puzzling. This isn't about whether Reaction Johnson is talented. She is. She's a relentless defender. She has championship experience, and she clearly did improve her overall game. The real question is, does she match what Indiana actually needs right now?
And they signed Myisha Hines-Allen, who is 6'1". Now, Myisha Hines-Allen is strong. She is definitely going to be having your back. She's a very Sophie Cunningham type enforcer player, but she is again 6'1", which other than AB and Mo Billings, they don't have a lot of length, and Mo Billings is 6'4". So ideally,
the New York Liberty aren't just big, they're elite big. Breanna Stewart is a perennial MVP contender. Jonquel Jones is a former MVP. They've got the ability to switch everything defensively and the size to dominate smaller teams in the post. When the Indiana Fever faced them in the playoffs last season, the size gap was obvious. Caitlin Clark is 6 feet, Kelsey Mitchell is 5 feet 8 inches, and they were getting swallowed up on drives. The answer to that issue isn't adding another undersized guard, it's bringing in someone who can contest shots at the rim and rebound against bigger lineups. The Atlanta Dream understood this. They selected Medina Okote at number. She's 6 feet 5 inches with real post ability and defensive upside. That's exactly the type of player Indiana needed. And she was right there at 10.
New York, who are big. Breanna Stewart, Satu Sabally, Leonie Fibich, Jonquel Jones. Now Sabrina, she is 6 foot or 6'1", about the same size as Caitlin. So she isn't like an enormous monster or anything like that. But the rest of that team is big. The Atlanta Dream are big. And now the Mystics, all of their drafts are enormous. There's a lot of length that is being valued in the WNBA.
Reaction Johnson is now the third point guard on Indiana's roster behind Caitlin Clark and Lexi Hull. Yes, the Indiana Fever dealt with injuries at guard last season, but that was an outlier. Multiple guards going down at once isn't something you plan for with a lottery pick. You fix depth issues in the second round or through free agency. The 10th selection in the draft is meant to be a core rotation piece, someone who fills a real need for Indiana. That need was interior defense and rebounding, not another ball handler. And think about this from Reaction Johnson's perspective. She just won a national championship at South Carolina. She's a winner. She's proven. And now she's heading to a team where she's the third-string point guard behind one of the most ball-dominant players in basketball history. How many minutes is she realistically going to get? What's her path to meaningful playing time? Stephanie White tried to explain it. She talked about winning, about championship pedigree, about players who understand how to play together, and those are fine points, but they don't answer the core question. Does this move make the Fever better prepared to compete with the New York Liberty, the Connecticut Sun, the Las Vegas Aces? Does adding a 5 feet 9 inches point guard help you defend Breanna Stewart in the post or Jonquel Jones on the glass? The answer is no. And Fever fans knew it instantly. Social media erupted, not with criticism of Raven Johnson as a player, but with real confusion about the front office's strategy.
Johnson, I yelped. I actually yelped. I was sitting home by myself watching the draft and I yelped. It's not because I hate Raven Johnson or anything. I just was shocked. I was very shocked. Raven Johnson is 5'9", and not only is she a point guard, she is now Indiana Fever's third point guard on the roster. And yes, that was an area where they did have a lot of people going down last season, but that was like a...
Medina Okote was still available at 10. She's 6 feet 5 inches. She has post ability. She's a true rim protector. The Atlanta Dream grabbed her at 13 and they were already a big team. They recognized the importance of size in today's WNBA. Or look at what happened right after the Indiana Fever pick. Cody McMahon went to the Washington Mystics at 11. She's 6 feet 3 inches with range and defensive upside. Marta Suarez was still on the board. Even Sarah Tabayasu, who eventually went to the Chicago Sky, made more sense as a bigger wing defender. The Fever had options. They went with the one that didn't solve their biggest weakness.
This is the kind of stuff that gets ironed out. I mean, this is sports. Put on your big girl pants and get out there on the court, you know? That's just how I think about things. But this is more of a front office issue. I was giving the Indiana Fever a bit of the benefit of the doubt with their front office, as it did seem like they were...
Now, to be fair to the Indiana Fever front office, they did address size later in the draft. They selected Justine Pastor from Vanderbilt at pick 22. She's 6 feet 4 inches. She can stretch the floor. A true stretch forward with real three-point range. She shot 42% from deep last season and led the SEC in made threes. That kind of shooting helped Vanderbilt reach their first Sweet 16 since 2009. She absolutely has a path to making this roster. But here's the issue. Pastor was still there in the second round. You don't spend a lottery pick on a point guard you don't need when you could have taken a starting caliber big in the first round and still gotten Pastor later. That's where the logic breaks down. It feels like roster construction working against itself rather than building toward balance.
Gosh, the Mystics are enormous. And in the second round, the Indiana Fever did take Justine Passat. She was a Vanderbilt get, but the Indiana Fever also could have taken Neepkins. And Neepkins ended up going to the Connecticut Sun at number 15. Now, do I think Raven Johnson is a better player than Neepkins? I think that Raven Johnson does add a lot to a team, but just as far as how the Fever built their squad, Neepkins, I think, would have fit a little better as a...
Compare what the Indiana Fever did to what other teams accomplished in this draft. The Golden State Valkyries are building with intention. They're scouting overseas, finding value in unexpected places, adding international versatility through a Japanese prospect who expands their roster flexibility. The Washington Mystics went all in on size. They brought in players like Lauren Betts and Dominique Toyever, both giving them clear interior presence. The Seattle Storm took Reagan Beers at 3, a 19-year-old international prospect with massive upside. These teams all show a clear identity. They know exactly what they're building. The question is, what is Indiana's vision? From the outside, it looks like they got caught up in the moment. Raven Johnson was still on the board at 10. She has name recognition, she has a championship ring, and it feels like they convinced themselves that was enough value to justify the pick. But real value isn't about who's available at the moment. It's about who actually fills your biggest roster needs.
She has some perimeter ability. She can shoot from deep. She's a pretty quality stretch 3-4 shooter. So it does kind of fill a role for the Indiana Fever if she does make the team, because I don't even know who actually will be making this team. But, you know, I think about it and I do wonder about Michaela Timpson. I could actually see Passat making the Indiana Fever over Michaela Timpson this year. She averaged about 30 minutes a game and came away with 11 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 2.3 assists a game. Her and Michaela Blake's, and of course their other.
Break down what this Fever roster really looks like. Now you've got Caitlin Clark orchestrating the offense. Got Kelsey Mitchell as primary scoring option. You've got Aaliyah Boston anchoring the paint. Lexi Hull providing perimeter shooting value here. Added Myisha Hines-Allen for toughness and physicality grit. That's a strong core, but where rim protection here? Where's the defensive anchor who can contest shots and clean glass against elite front courts here? Nalissa Smith is 6 feet 4 inches and athletic, but not a traditional shot blocker. More a face-up forward role. Aaliyah Boston is excellent but can't do it alone. Seconds when the Indiana Fever faced the Connecticut Sun in playoffs last season, Alyssa Thomas and Dewana Bonner were scoring at will inside paint area here. The answer wasn't adding another small guard either. Here's what makes this especially frustrating for Fever fans. Front office had been making smart moves. They brought in Stephanie White as head coach, someone with WNBA experience who understands managing egos and building a system well-structured. Re-signed Kelsey Mitchell, keeping core intact together. They added Myisha Hines-Allen for toughness. They were building coherence. And then they made a draft pick that doesn't fit puzzle. Could Raven Johnson prove everyone wrong again? Absolutely, she's a competitor. Improving every year. She's got mentality of someone who uses doubt as fuel here. Maybe she becomes rotation piece here. Maybe her defense translates. Having 3-point guards gives Indiana flexibility to run different lineups, but that's a lot of May for lottery pick here. And let's address the room. The off-court narrative, the Caitlin Clark wave-off moment, the viral clip, the history between these two players. Does it matter? Probably not. This is professional basketball. Rivalries get set aside. Former college opponents become teammates all the time. If Raven Johnson and Caitlin Clark are both professionals, which they are, they'll figure it out. That's not the issue here. The issue is basketball fit. The issue is roster construction. The issue is whether the Indiana Fever used its resources in the smartest way possible. And based on what we know about their needs and what was available, the answer is no. Think about it strategically. The WNBA is evolving toward positionless basketball, but size still matters. The teams that win championships have length, versatility, and rim protection. The Las Vegas Aces have Aya Wilson and had Candace Parker. The New York Liberty have Breanna Stewart and Jonquel Jones. The Connecticut Sun have Alyssa Thomas and Brianna Jones. You need players who can defend multiple positions and survive in the paint. Indiana's biggest weakness was interior defense. They had a chance to fix it. They didn't. Now compare that to what the Washington Mystics did. They drafted Lauren Betts at 5. A true center with size, post-scoring, and shot-blocking ability. Then they added Dominique Malona at 9. Both picks directly addressed frontcourt needs. That's coherent drafting. That's a plan. That's identifying a weakness and attacking it. Indiana identified the same weakness, tried to patch it with Myisha Hines-Allen in free agency, and then used a lottery pick on a position that didn't address the core problem. And here's the thing about championship pedigree. Stephanie White was right to mention it when talking about Raven Johnson. Winning matters. Players who've been through pressure moments, who've cut down nets, who understand big stages absolutely bring value. But championship pedigree can't override positional need.
I knew it. And remember when Mick from Mick Talks Hoops said it was going to be Olivia Miles? I think he did change his mind, but I really wanted him to put a wager down because I knew I was going to win this one. Now, I don't exactly know if that was the best move as far as what they need, but I do think that AZ Fudd is a strong 3-point shooter, and I think her familiarity with playing with play.
You can't win in the WNBA with 4-point guards and no rim protection. It doesn't matter how many college titles those guards have. The comparison to make is the 2024 draft, when the Indiana Fever had the first overall pick and selected Caitlin Clark. That move was obvious, but they also addressed other needs through free agency and roster building around her skill set. They constructed a team that complemented her strengths. This year, they had a chance to continue that process. A chance to add a defensive anchor who could take pressure off Aaliyah Boston in the paint. Instead, they went in a different direction. What makes it more confusing is that Indiana's front office has shown awareness of roster balance before. They didn't overstack redundant guards when they already had Kelsey Mitchell. They've generally avoided unnecessary duplication. But this time, with Clark and Lexie Hull already capable of handling perimeter duties, they added another point guard. That inconsistency raises questions. Maybe there's information we don't have. Maybe Raven Johnson's workouts were so impressive that Indiana felt they couldn't pass. Maybe they see something in her that doesn't fully show on college tape. Maybe there's a trade plan in motion. But none of that has been clearly communicated, and in the absence of clarity, fans are left guessing. Another possibility is pure value assessment. Indiana saw a projected lottery-level talent still on the board at 10 and treated it as a steal. But value only matters relative to fit. A talented player at a position you don't need isn't real value, it's redundancy. So where does this leave the Fever? A talented roster led by Clark, with scoring, playmaking, and coaching stability under Stephanie White. But still a team with structural questions. Still vulnerable against elite frontcourts. And still lacking a true interior defensive presence to consistently battle teams like the New York Liberty, the Las Vegas Aces, and the Connecticut Sun. The question now is whether Indiana can correct course through free agency, trades, or internal development. Because if they can't, they'll be repeating the same problems that limited them before. And this time, there won't be injuries or inexperience to blame. So was it a mistake? From a pure roster construction standpoint, it doesn't fit. It duplicates roles, ignores interior need, and passes on clearer positional upgrades. Could it still work out? Sure, basketball always leaves room for surprises. But that outcome requires a lot of things going right. And in a league as competitive as the WNBA, teams don't usually get to rely on maybe. They need balance, size, and fit.
Paid player right now in the WNBA with her 3-year salary, combined that is. But it does seem like the Seattle Storm are in complete rebuild mode. So they're looking, I think they could be looking to tank, to be completely fair, but they'll be needing to tank for a while because in the WNBA, they combine your last 2 years as far as how high your draft pick is. And they didn't do that bad.
In that veteran group, she's already spoken openly about feeling undervalued, and putting someone like Skylar Diggins-Smith in the same locker room as Caitlin Clark, who represents the exact kind of attention and opportunity the older generation didn't fully receive, could easily create tension or resentment, which is why the situation becomes so delicate, because what we're really seeing now is Satou Sabally preparing to get paid, likely by an expansion franchise like the Golden State Valkyries. That's desperate to make an immediate splash, where she becomes the face of a new identity and a max contract centerpiece, while the Phoenix Mercury try to retool around Brittany Griner and Kalia Copper, hoping they can replace lost production through depth, turning it into a gamble on both sides, and meanwhile Diggins-Smith will still attract interest, but the real question is whether the Indiana Fever are wise enough to avoid a bad fit, because what they actually need is a steady backup. Point guard who can run the system when Caitlin Clark rests without demanding a spotlight, and that has never really been her role, so forcing that Indiana narrative connection would be risky, especially as the new CBA continues to reshape the league, breaking up talent concentrations, dismantling potential super teams, and pushing franchises into tough financial decisions where even successful cores become expensive to maintain, creating a free agency environment that is far less predictable than before and putting expansion teams at the center of the league's next competitive shift. If the Golden State Valkyries handle their roster building correctly around Satou Sabally, balancing talent with fit instead of just stacking names, they absolutely have a real shot at becoming playoff-ready quickly. But if they chase big contracts without cohesion, they risk turning a promising expansion launch into years of instability, and that same pressure applies to Portland and Toronto as they enter the league, because this is their rare chance to build structure from scratch the right way. And for the Indiana Fever, the decision on Skylar Diggins-Smith would say a lot about their direction, whether they're fully committed to building around Caitlin Clark with smart-fitting, role-defined pieces, or whether they lean into nostalgia and emotional storylines that don't necessarily match basketball needs. With Clark already operating as the engine of the offense, alongside Aaliyah Boston and Kelsey Mitchell forming a strong young core, Indiana is in a position where every roster move should be about fit, spacing, and chemistry rather than name value or sentiment. As for Sabally, her path is the most straightforward but also the most volatile. She's clearly positioned to become the focal point somewhere, likely with a franchise like Golden State or another expansion market, but whether that turns into winning or just a heavy usage role on a developing team will depend entirely on how smartly that roster is constructed around her.